Welcome to another bonus live stream from Save Your Sanity podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, and I'm here with my guest today, Dr. Sundardas and Annamalay. And we've had an opportunity to talk on Save Your Sanity podcast, so we wanted to take another opportunity to talk about this very important topic today: how to relieve chronic stress and anxiety to improve your health. And there's a big important connection here that some people don't see. Isn't that the case?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so important for us to realize the connectivity between our emotions, what's happening in our environment, what's happening in our relationships, what's happened in our past, how we receive things, what meaning we give things, and how these things actually manifest and get into ourselves and make changes and things shift and all of that. So I'm delighted to have Dr. Sundardas with us again. And be sure to go and listen to the episode that we did. Go to Save Your Sanity podcast, and you can find it there among all the other ones. There's 129 of them for you right there. So that'll give you a few things to get interested in. And I want to also tell you that you can find Dr. Sundardas at drsundardas.com. What a surprise. So that's there for you too. And he's written a book and he talks about his program, Life by Design, and you can learn more about it at his website. So also very important to get good help. And he's certainly a legend in Asia, and everyone turns to him for the inside information about how to get well. And we have the opportunity to talk with him today. So let's move away now and talk about what is really going on when we feel stress and anxiety. How do we get in touch with the fact that there are underlying things going on in our body? What might we look for?
Well, that's a great question. And the first thing is that it's should be an important part of our regular practice to check in with your body. You know, we check in with our computers, we check in with our emails, we check in with our friends. Do we check in with our body? So the reality is, most of us wait until we have symptoms or we feel sick or we feel unwell rather than otherwise. Having come from a background of being pretty ill for the major part of my life, I learned very early in my life to have this daily, I call it a meter reading. And to be honest, I would say that in the early years of my life, because of all the different things, if I paid too much attention to it, I would never have gotten anything done. So I had to wait until it reached a certain threshold, and then I would go, okay, I got to pay attention to this. So most people are unaware of what they're really doing. And if you are a super sensitive person, the challenge of being that attentive is it will cripple you or paralyze you because you can't get anything done. On the other hand, if you are fairly neurotypical, then developing a habit of paying attention to what's going on with your physical and emotional self will actually ensure that you can be more productive, because you're not going to do something halfway through and then realize that it's too much for you. So that's at the most basic level.
Yes, and I think, we can reduce it even more. Something that I find useful is me to ask myself every now and again, where are my shoulders? Because if I just check in and I find that my shoulders are creeping up, or I'm leaning forward over my computer or whatever, right away I know I'm not breathing well and I have tension in my body. So
Yep.
something very simple, like just being able to identify, okay, what's up with my shoulders right now, can help us to stay in the present moment and aware of what we're internalizing. Now, it may be
Absolutely.
physical, that maybe ergonomically your desk is not in the right place or your computer is not in the right place. But it may also be that you have a generalized anxiety and you're just simply tense much of the time. And that's asking a lot of your body, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a great point that you brought up, and to provide context for it, all of us have our favorite way of stressing up. So for some people, it'll be shoulders. For somebody else, it will be their knees. For someone else, it will be that they start twitching slightly in some area of the body, and it's not obvious to anyone else, but they can feel it. So the moment you know what your little trigger is, then you know you are exceeding your threshold. Uh, I,
Mm-hmm.
I I used to play this little game with myself. You see, I mean, after a while, I have to create some humor about it, or get too grim. So I had this whole sequence that I'll get up in the morning, and the first line that I'll ask myself is, "Can I laugh inside my head? Is there something that I find funny?" And in the earlier days, I would actually get physical symptoms, so that was easier. Then it got to a point when I learned how to manage it so well that I wouldn't get physical symptoms. But I would find myself becoming rather grim and, very task orientated, and that wasn't a good idea. It meant that the stress was creeping up. So I created this. Do you have a smile inside your head routine? So if I got up in the morning and I don't find anything to smile at, and there's always something to smile at, something to laugh about, right? If you just look around and you see what people do. And when I can't, I know, okay, I've exceeded that little threshold, and it's time to dial back, because my threshold is being exceeded. And then if I'm not careful within the next few days, there'll be downstream consequences. Sure.
Yeah, it's so important to notice. So it could be, as you say, little things like sometimes people will have nervous things that they do, like they'll find that they cross their legs in a certain way, or they're bouncing their knee, or they're doing
Yeah,
something that demonstrates some anxiety. So it's good to take some check of our bodies and find out what's going on. And then the next step is to find out, like, what's up with this? I mean, why is this? What's going on? I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the stress, but why? And then maybe start to explore, like, what's
yeah,
going on in my daily life. What am I concerned about? What have I have coming up that I might be anxious about? How are my relationships? How do I feel about myself? I mean, a ton of things
yeah,
affect our level of stress. So
yeah.
I love that. What's there to smile about, and can I find a smile? I was working with a client the other day, and I said to him, um, I've just talked to you for an hour, and there have been many times when you had an opportunity to change your face, but you have not changed your face. Nothing has moved. And he said, yes, people tell me all the time that I look a little grumpy. And I said, well, do you think that affects your relationship? If your face is always grumpy and it's always got downward motion in the muscles, have you ever thought about lifting the muscles on purpose? And I told him this story about, 25 years ago. I had stopped at a crosswalk and people were walking, and I was smiling at the people and they weren't smiling back. And I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror, and I realized I wasn't smiling. They couldn't see that I was smiling. And so that was a big moment for me, that I think I'm smiling at you. It doesn't register as a smile on my face, therefore you're not getting it. of course we're going to be at odds with one another. We're going to be on different pages entirely. So becoming congruent within ourselves is an important thing to do.
Yeah, that's so true. And so you spoke about how do we identify the stress. One is this physical stuff. So you have to work out for yourself what is your signal about when everything's well with the world with you and when you feel disturbed. So it could be this emotional stuff, the smile inside. Earlier on, I used to have, my nose, I would start getting a bit sniffy. So I played this little game inside my head. So I'd be working really hard, and if ever something exceeded my threshold, I'll start getting sniffy, and then I'll have this whole internal dialogue. I'm a science fi fan, science fi. So if you're watching one of those space movies, and then something invades the boundary, and then you have this alarm going. Perimeter breach, right? So the moment I started doing this, I would have this alarm inside my head going perimeter breach, with a loud saxophone inside. So that I would laugh about it, and then I would go, okay, now I've got to do something more about it. So what stressed me out? Have I been eating properly? Have I been drinking enough water? Did I get enough sleep in the last 48 to 96 hours? Is there something I'm obsessing about? So like this list of 3 to 5 questions, and that will help me zero in on what I need to do within the next 24 to 48 hours to adjust it. And
Yes.
yeah,
Sleep is a big issue. Let's talk about that for a minute, Sundardas, because people seem to think that sleep is not a purposeful activity. It's a kind of leftover. It's what you do when you can't keep going any longer,
yeah,
as opposed to thinking about it as a health restorer
yeah,
and to keep us continuously healthy. So
yeah.
what can people do if they've realized that they're not getting enough sleep and
You
their
know,
sleep is disturbed?
yeah, that's a great question because I'm going to say I was guilty of exactly what you just said up to the time I was 42, right?
Oh,
Autistic issues, uh, s- s- minor brain damage, so I couldn't sleep. It was a time of anxiety, so I chronically underslept up to that point.
hmm.
And that was the year in which that was 1 month, and I was creating another business and working in my clinic and working out 7 hours a week, and then adding another 5 hours because I was doing a martial arts exam, and I collapsed and had heart failure and all of that. And the
Oh.
major reason for that was chronic sleep deprivation, right?
Mm.
So it affected your immune system. So chronic sleep deprivation has been shown to change your immune system responses negatively, increase blood pressure, increase cholesterol, increase C reactive protein CRP, so the muscle damage occurs, open you up to infections. And
Wow.
I will say that the reasons for that behavior was some of it was physiological, the rest was emotional. So almost like, we spoke about this earlier on. You have a childhood program, you have comments and observations made by you when you're a child and you're very impressionable. And then what happens is it's almost like there's a little virus sitting down there, like COVID is a virus, and it sits down there. And it sits in your psyche, and then whenever there's a trigger outside that activates the virus, you have an amygdala shutdown, goes into your limbic system, hooks into your nervous system, your immune system, changes your biochemistry. And this is relates back to our question, what is it that stresses and makes us anxious? It's about these little viruses. So in a normal day, we have anything like 3 to 5,000 interruptions. And each one of those interruptions is an opportunity for one or more of these viruses to come out and do their little dance. If they do that long enough, you get majorly sick, right? So
Yeah.
after that, I learned how to sleep, and I got really deliberate about that. I reviewed the biochemistry, the physiology. I broke everything down. Now it became major. So I looked at all my habits and broke it all down and create. And that was one of the basis for the book Life by Design and my sleep protocols. And after that, every time a patient came in, I would ask them, "How do you sleep?" And you know what? Regardless of what the health condition was, everyone was either majorly sleep deprived or minorly sleep deprived. With major sleep deprivation, you develop chronic ill health issues, or you have catastrophic health issues. With minor sleep deprivation, the quality of your life drops,
Mm.
right? And I'm going to say that when I was a much younger person in my teens, um, as befits an autistic, I wanted to test all my physical parameters, so I would go for 48 hours without sleep just to see the effects and carefully noted what would happen to me. I would run marathons, I did a whole bunch of religious type rituals just to figure out the physics, the chemistry, the biology of it without the belief or the faith. And all of that were inherently stressful.
Well, I'm sure. I that's an amazing thing to do. It's like you went into your own physical cave, if you like, and explored what was going on.
Yeah,
And then you come out and you have insights for yourself, but you have insights into what may be happening for others, which is what
yeah,
makes you great at what you do.
yeah,
And I think it's important to pick up on a piece that you mentioned earlier, and we should spend a little time on it because you mentioned scripts that we've
yeah,
received,
yeah,
and this is pivotal. If you have been told, for instance, as a child, like I was just working with someone a couple of hours ago, and she said, my mother always used to say to me, I never wanted children.
yeah,
Well, you have a constant hearing of that, and it stands out to you as a child
yeah,
that you weren't wanted.
yeah,
You have a script that says, make yourself small, try to be invisible, maybe she won't notice you're
yeah,
here.
yeah,
And these things happen, and then they affect our physical health, right?
yeah. And there's a great point, and we go back to the virus I talked about. So the scripts are almost like the DNA code for the viruses that develop. So you have a script that goes, and your mother tells you, I never wanted children. So the first message is be small. The second message is you have to justify your existence. Can you
Right.
imagine how heavy that is? So be small. So wherever you go, you have to be as innocuous, as invisible as possible. The second possible virus is you have to justify existence, which means you have to be dutiful, you have to be on time, on target, you have to be the perfect person. And if you're not, you could die any moment. You could be rejected, you could have been expelled, aborted, and it constantly plays on your mind. And
Mhm.
there was when I trained in my early years in transactional analysis, there were 12 commands there, and that became the basis for a program I teach. And one of them is permission to exist. And
Yeah.
permission to exist is one of the most fundamental permissions. And if you don't have that, you don't live. In fact, the research behind this developed when they found that children, babies in orphanages would suddenly die. They just wouldn't thrive. And
Right.
they eventually found out that this was because if they didn't get enough strokes, if they were not stimulated, the
Mhm.
nervous system just wouldn't thrive. And so we
Yeah.
need strokes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's called marasmus when
Marasmus, exactly.
yeah. So when we're actually not acknowledged
Yeah,
physically, there's
yeah,
nobody present for us and lets
yeah,
our body know. Just think about a cow or a horse. You get spit out of your mother and then you get licked off. You're
yeah,
there, you're present, I see you. And that's the bonding experience that we need. That's the validation of our
yeah.
existence. And these things become very important. And if you have a mom who can say, I never wanted children, my mom was particularly virulent. We're talking about viruses. And she would say to me, it's a good thing you're smart, young lady, because you're fat and ugly. And she would say that repeatedly. I'm an only child. She didn't want children either. And, I know how that affected me because this endeavor to be perfect at all times, to never have a hair out of place, to make sure that you were like as turned out as you possibly could so that you wouldn't appear fat and ugly. These things can make a huge difference in your life. Now, hopefully everyone listening has not had those extremes, but if you did, or if you had something close to it, or you're recognizing a message that you repeatedly heard that is negative, now is a really good time to stop and say, how could that be manifesting in my physical health? What could still be happening? For me, like I could be supremely overweight because I subconsciously was told I was fat. These things could be picked up in my
Yeah,
psyche, and I might not even understand that they're there.
yeah,
And so these scripts that we're talking about that we've received as children, particularly when we're young and our brain is developing, are really worth looking at when it comes to our physical health. So what do we do if we're ready to relieve that? What are the
and
first steps aside from just becoming aware of it?
well, the I'm going to now talk about the insights of an autistic because it's very different from how a neurotypical person would behave. The first thing is, if you're a neurotypical child, you would want approval and acceptance by authority figures. So whatever they say, you would say, you would accept as true. Okay, and that is the fatal mistake number one. So as a young autistic, I experienced the world as being very unsafe, and I needed to make it safe. And everything had to be logical. It had to fit together. If it didn't, it's like push it out. So the first thing was every adult who came up with a line had to pass my test of is it worth listening to them. So any message that you hear inside, the first thing to ask yourself is it true? How true is it? Right? And secondly, is the person delivering that message an expert in that area? So right now, as an adult, you would go to the accountant to do tax. You wouldn't go to your plumber and ask him to do your taxes, right? It's the common sense. You will go to a urologist to fix your urinary tract infections and not go to your orthopedist and say, hey, fix my urinary tract infection, because people are experts.
Right.
So
Right.
if you have a plumber give you advice about your taxes and you actually accept it, you're asking for trouble. So all you see what I mean? It's as simple as that. So anytime you hear a message, the first thing to ask yourself is this true? And is the person delivering it qualified to make the comment? Right?
Yeah, that's a big question because when we go back in the therapeutic process, I had this experience that might help us understand. I was raised by two hijackals, toxic people that I talk about. And that's what Save Your Sanity podcast is about, because it's help for toxic relationships. And so I had these two, and they were not altogether nice humans. So, you know, as a child, you start to calibrate your world by whether they're telling you what's good, what's right, what's wrong, whatever. But if you don't re-examine those things when you're an adult, you will keep living in those patterns subconsciously, and they will have an effect on your body. So, my mother would have these big judgments about other humans, big groups of humans that shouldn't be on the planet, and these kind of things. So I had to look at her one day and say, I totally disagree with her about this. And if I disagree with her about that, how many other things do I likely disagree with her about?
Yeah.
And that would include how she sees me or
Yeah.
saw me, because my mother's long deceased, but how she saw me, how she commented on me, because we always have to remember people comment from their frame of reference, not
Yeah.
yours, right? And so these messages that are coming to us all through our childhood by these people that we need to take care of us and keep us alive
Yeah.
become potentially troublesome if we don't examine them, because they will permeate our physical health.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about an example. I was 4 years old, and I grew up in a very religious family. Okay. And so they had all these rules, and you pray in the prayer room, and you learn all these prayers in Sanskrit and all of that. And I remember being 4 or 5, and I asked my grand aunt, who was very, very religious, if God is supposed to be everywhere, why do we have to do our prayers in the prayer room? Okay. And what she did was she hit me. It wasn't very hard. Okay. It wasn't very hard. But this is where the difference between a neurotypical and an autistic child would be. Neurotypical child would go, oh, I did something wrong. Being autistic, I felt sorry for her. It was, because it was I'm a far younger human. You lived X number of years. I don't know how many years then. And later on, I knew how much older she was. And this is something you believe in. So it stands to reason that if you believe in this and you know so much about this, you should be able to explain in a simple version to me the basis for your belief.
And there
If you
comes
cannot,
the logic, right?
yeah, exactly. So if you cannot explain in a simple way to a 4-year-old child the basis for your belief that we all have to follow, then there is something seriously wrong in the way you're practicing your beliefs. I don't even know if what you believe is true or not. That's a separate discussion. But the way you're practicing it, you haven't made it clear to yourself, which means that everything you say, I cannot trust. Everything you say can be fatally flawed. It may even be right, but I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if it's relevant to me, so I have to be very, very careful. Right?
Oh, that's huge, because that puts you in a very unsafe situation.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you're calibrating that way, and at 4 years old, you can see
Yeah.
the failure of logic,
Yeah.
then you become unsafe by
Yes.
the way that you were following through that. That's
Yeah.
very difficult. But I think for many of us, we got even feeling messages, emotional messages that were at odds with what they were saying. They would say that they loved us, but they would behave as though they
Yeah.
wished we weren't there.
Yeah.
And these kind of messages also create chronic stress, because we can't make sense of them. So we have cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
And because we don't have parietal and prefrontal brain development when we're little, it goes into our bodies like, I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
That becomes a stressor.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about physical health, but you can never separate physical health from mental health or emotional health
Yeah.
or spiritual health or
Yeah.
any of these places. And I'm thinking about your question to your aunt, like, if God
Grand
is
aunt. Yeah.
everywhere, why do we
Yeah.
why do we have to go to the prayer room to pray?
Yeah.
And I think many children have had those questions, and similar questions that are just a big curiosity. And the unthinking adults come down and say, because I said so, or
Yeah.
because that's the way it is.
Yes.
And so we adapt and inherit and adopt limiting beliefs,
Yeah.
erroneous beliefs. We stop inquiring because we are not validated for being
True.
curious.
Yeah.
And so we don't really have the breadth of experience that we could have. So that's a huge conversation. But let's come back down to bodies for a moment.
Yeah.
As we're
So
talking about this, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So the bottom line here is, uh, any message that you pick up about yourself, anything here inside, you first have to be real about it. I mean, is it necessarily true anymore? If it was true in the first place at all, right? And the second thing here is, based on the message, you have a certain way of reacting in your body to things outside. And once you identify that message, the next thing to do is to work out if your responses are relevant or valid. So you went back to the idea of your mom making very judgmental about certain groups of people, and you disagreed with her. Okay. The moment you do that, that would then mean that you are unlikely to respond in the same way as your mom to these groups of people. So you have another track altogether. So the immediate when we become aware of this, we actually change aspects of our behavior. And when you change the aspects of the behavior, try it on. Does it reduce your stress or does it increase it? So you're developing your biofeedback mechanisms
Mhm.
and becoming more real with who you are and where you are right now. So when we go back to sleep again, so I used to sleep late because of all the things I did, and that was when I had my creative time from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. So when I started changing my sleep patterns, I found I had my creative time from about 10 in the morning, 9:30 to 11 a.m. So it didn't disappear. It changed. And
Mhm.
I also found that when I slept enough, my productivity skyrocketed. Before that, my belief was I needed to work every hour to get all the things done. But the moment I slept enough, and it's a big difference from living on 4 or 5 hours of sleep for years to being able to sleep 7 to 8 hours and wake up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And the moment I did that, in that 2 hours, I would get the equivalent of hours or days of work done, which I couldn't do before. And the
Mhm.
whole day, like I'm working 8 hours, my productivity, I actually started measuring this, you see, before and after, just to satisfy that part of me. And I would get the equivalent of what would have taken a week done in a day or two. And I went, okay, point made. And then, of course, I went into the biochemistry of sleep, physiology, and then one of the books I'm working on is a sleep book to be released, I don't know, in the next 5 to 6 years. Because you know what? One of our biggest issues, the biggest stresses that happen is we don't sleep well. Because just before you sleep, all the unresolved stuff pops up. It's knocking on your door, and that's one of the reasons people don't sleep well. They can't
Yes.
wind down.
So what do you think they should do? What's the first step to improving your sleep then?
Okay. So first thing is, no TV, no radio, no TV, no Wi-Fi, no devices that give you blue light because it affects your brain 2 hours before bed, right? The second thing is temperature control. Make sure you have a cool bath, not a hot one, and make sure that the room you're in is cool enough. The other thing is, if we are all problem solvers, you spend a whole day solving problems, then you don't have a shutdown ritual. Now, if you're going to shut down your computer, it goes through a little ritual that's a switch on and switch off, right? So your brain needs to shut down. So one of the issues that people have is they're problem solving the whole day, and then they want your brain to stop problem solving. Instead, it's trying to problem solve while you're sleeping, and that creates the issue. So we tell them, have a little notebook, 2 hours before bed, jot down all the stuff going on inside your head. And then I have a 5-step protocol. The first thing is you have to decide of all the things going on, what are the issues that you can actually control. And 90% of the time, what's going on in your head are things that you have no control over. So I have a real ritual about it and sequence of steps. But the highlights are you can only control the things for which you alone are responsible for. You have accountability, you have feedback, you have the skill sets, and you have control over the environment. Those are the only things you can control. And if whatever you're going on inside your head is outside that, it's outside your control. So the first thing is to recognize what you can control and what you can't. So one of the common issues about stress is you are worrying about stuff that there's no way you can possibly impact. Like older people, they're obsessing about their children, their adult children, and how they're living their lives and how they're spending their time, energy, and relationships. There's no way you can control it. There's nothing you can say that will influence them. You're just spinning your wheels, right? So that's the first thing. Become really aware of what you can control and create a to-do list, and it'll come down to 2 or 3 items. That's it. Then you put that away. And you spend the next 45 minutes either listening to music, soothing music. The other joke I often make is some people can read a religious text because that puts others to sleep. And you can also I have a stack of comic books specifically to read before bed.
Really?
Yes.
What's special about those comic books?
They totally turn off my thinking brain. And I look at them and realize I'm glad I didn't have children like that.
Okay, now the truth comes out. Now the truth comes out. Yes. Well, as a mother of 3, I really get it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
I'm a father and I also see all these children and I feel for the parents.
Yeah.
So one of them is Calvin and Hobbes and the other is Garfield.
Ah, yes.
So
Yeah.
Garfield is my alter ego, the kind of life I would love to live. But I know I would get bored within a day.
Well, we'll have to send you a big box so you can sleep in it. That'll be a good start. So I'm talking with Dr. Sundardas Annamalay from Singapore today, my friend, and I want to remind you again that we did a very in-depth interview on Save Your Sanity podcast. So you can go over to Save Your Sanity podcast and find it among other ones. If you want to work with Dr. Sundardas, go and find him here, drsundardas.com. And if you want to talk to me, I'm always available for you too for relationship help. I hope that you found some interesting things. Maybe you'll sleep better tonight or be on the path to sleeping better. Maybe you've woken up to the fact that you are living with chronic stress. And if you're living with a toxic person, I can guarantee you're living with chronic stress and anxiety, and this is going to have a negative effect on your health. So we should talk if that's the case for you. Thank you so much for being part of this broadcast, Dr. Sundardas.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Dr. Rhoberta. It was so much fun.
Yes, it always is fun to talk with you. So everyone go to SaveYourSanityPodcast.com if you want to hear my last interview with Dr. Sundardas and so many other things there for you to help you with your relationships. If you've had a toxic one with a parent, a partner, an ex, a sibling, you'll learn things there. So until we talk again, take very good care of yourself and sleep well.